My grandfather taught us how to play, everything from war to casino to poker, rummy, gin, backgammon.
We'd go on long trips somewhere, and we'd have that all in the station wagon. With one was leaning over the seat, and the other one sitting in the back.
I would sit down with my brothers, we'd play different things on a rainy day and whatnot. And
we played a lot of games for the holidays. Pretty much from sort of Thanksgiving to Christmas.
And every time we would go, to be with our grandparents, we'd always play games.
There's still probably a closet full of games at my parents' house.
Yeah, I grew up playing a lot of games as a kid. It was one of the things that we did. Our house, we didn't have a TV. We didn't watch many movies much at all. We read lots of books, but when we wanted to do something as a family, we played board games.
A lot of people who don't play games regularly say, well, I used to do that as a kid, but you still do play games? If you go back 25 years or something like that, 30 years now, I think the markets were very similar. The games that you bought in the United States were the same games that were popular in Europe. And at that time, the publishers in Germany and the press in Germany, they got together and decided to create a jury of people in the press to once a year select the best game that was published in the last year. They call it Spiel des Jahres, which is Game of the Year. And by doing that, it's grown to the point now where the game that wins will be able to sell hundreds of thousands of games within the next year solely because they won the award.
Origins has an Origins Award, which is done by the game industry. The GAMA, which is the Game Manufacturers Association, runs that show and has been giving out the Origins Awards for many, many years. But there's no real national award that it has the significance of the SDJ.
By making an award that was worth winning financially, and financially is very important, it's nice to have an award to put on the shelf, but I think by making an award that was worth the money to go for, well, people go for it. And as a result, over the last 30 years, artists got better, publishers got better, so the whole gaming scene, if you want to call it that, in Germany kind of rallied around, and everybody individually and collectively worked very hard to be the one that won the award next year.
So one big difference between the US and the German game market is that newspapers in Germany will run game review columns. They will have people who review games regularly, and therefore the public will know, oh, this game exists, this game exists.
I'll give you the one story. Is we're in the Grand Hotel Esplanade in Berlin, and the press conference was at 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. As I came off the elevator, an Associated Press reporter was there. He says, you have to come with me. And I said, well, I have to be over there for the presentation. He says, I have a deadline and I need your pictures of you. And so I was like, nobody was there to tell me what to do. So we actually went outside the hotel, and he took a picture of me with the game in one hand and with an elf doll in the other. This was Elfenland, an elf doll in the other. That picture was in almost every paper in Germany the next day.
Of course, even the games that don't win are better than they were 5, 10, 15 years ago. So I think that's how it happened to be different there, that we didn't have a similar situation in the United States.
I think in America, there is this games are kids stuff, and then there is the hobby market. And the hobby market is these typical students who spend an enormous lot of time on very sophisticated games. But the middle ground, what I call, so to speak, the family, the core, isn't quite there in America.
Myriad Games started in 1999, so this is our 11th year. And so right around then, people that have been in the industry know that that was kind of a big changing point for when games were getting big, board games, specifically board and card games. So you had these kind of three iterations. You had like miniatures games back in the 70s and, you know, what we would call historicals now. So there was that kind of iteration. Then you had role-playing games, you know, also starting in the 70s and going into the 80s and really big in the 80s.
Yeah, you have the Dungeons and Dragons, you have all these things which are very attractive to the people in the teens and 20s, and they have the time for it.
And then into the 90s, now you've got collectible games. You've got Pokemon, which was huge as more of really a collectible phenomenon than a game, but it brought attention to the game.
No surprise that the trading card games, which are relatively complex, happen in America.
I guess it was 1993 or so, there was a game that came out called Magic the Gathering. And you might have heard of that one. So I became kind of a Magic junkie for a couple of years, 93, 94, 95. And then it wasn't until probably 98 that a good friend of mine named Dan Granquist introduced me to a game called Settlers of Catan.
Settlers of Catan, which has been described as cardboard crack.
People that liked games that maybe bought everything that Hasbro released or played some of these war games, or, you know, would find, you know, would get every Avalon Hill game that ever came out. They started hearing about this game in Germany called Settlers of Catan, or Siedler von Catan in German. But it was hard to get a hold of because it was made in Germany. So you had to know a buddy that was in the army, or somebody that traveled for business, or somebody that was coming over for vacation or something for some reason, to go and buy you a copy and mail it back to the US. So copies started sneaking into the United States, and people loved the game.
I think the big breakthrough game was Settlers. You know, when that came through, you know, my eyes were opened. I mean, they were starting to open, and I was just hooked from there.
Settlers of Catan is a game that I've always been amazed by, because it seems like if you teach it to non-gamers, I would think that it would be a little bit too complicated, but it doesn't seem to be.
Looks like you're ready for playing Settlers of Catan. Settlers of Catan. Please don't roll a 7, 'cause if you do, then half my cards are gone.
My name is Klaus Teuber. I'm a game designer, and one of my most famous games is Catan, Settlers of Catan.
So Catan was inspired by, my dad read a lot about Vikings, and also he thought it was very interesting to see that they were not only raiders, but they also were involved in trade.
When I read about the Vikings, when they discovered Iceland, I have a thought, what would happen if some explorers come to an island, there's no one, and what will they do?
If you drew a circle around all of the Azore Islands, you would probably get like what is Catan in his mind, and it's quasi historical in terms that a Viking tribe could have come out and settled on this fictitious island if that in fact, if the Azores were just a little bit more bigger and had more had sheep and all of the Catan resources to offer. So.
And I was reading Games magazine and heard about these games, Settlers of Catan and Carcassonne, and I looked at the games and I thought, they look a little boring, but I guess I'll try them out to see if they're any good or not. They were.
Suddenly we discovered Euro games, and they were wonderful. They were a lot shorter, fun, very interactive.
I remember the first time we played Puerto Rico, and I was just like, wow. I was just like, this game's amazing.
I think the first designer game I bought was Adolf Verpflichtet, also known as Hoity Toity. Had the Spiel des Jahres symbol. It's like, what the heck was that? I said, well, if it's Game of the Year in Germany, it can't be all that bad.
These aren't the kind of games you're likely to find in a Toys R Us or a Walmart. They were exotic. they were interesting, and everyone participated at the same time. It wasn't, you were waiting for your turn to come around.
So, I mean, you open it up and you get something that has real wood pieces and nice feeling cards and this theme.
But the thing that really blew us away when you opened it up was the production values were just fantastic. And it was a whole nother world.
One of my co-workers, who's actually now my husband, came in and he said, hey, you guys want to play a game? We're like Monopoly or, like the normal Scrabble. And he's like, no, I have this weird game called Carcassonne. So we loved it so much, we made him play every day for 6 months.
Yeah, the fun part is there is this concept or this word of being a gateway game.
A gateway game it introduces you to those, it has strategy, but it also has elements of luck. It's something that people can relate to quickly and they can pick up quickly.
Well, I mean, with Catan, so many people can grasp how to play that game.
Ticket to Ride's kind of the optimum. There's 3 rules basically, and that's all you need to know, and you can start playing.
This is where I played this game a ton. I really enjoyed it. My whole family enjoys it. And this is sincere. I'm not lying. I'm telling you, like, this is from my experience. You will enjoy Ticket to Ride. And literally, like, 3 other groups of customers are in the store, and a group over here goes, "Oh yeah, that game's awesome. We have it and we've played it." And then another person chimes in and they go, "Yeah, that game's awesome." And then the other person was like, "Oh yeah, we play that a bunch."
Several years ago, I had 2 emails within a couple of days. Both basically said, I took your game Ticket to Ride to my grandmother's house, and I played with my grandmother and my kids. And the next day, my grandmother called me and said, the next time you come, you bring that train game back.
Well, if someone likes boating, there's a game called Power Boats, which is a racing game. If someone likes horse racing, there's some really nice, Royal Turf is a nice horse racing game. If someone likes cars, you've got things like Formula Day, which is a car racing game.
There are family games, there are, games for gamers and games for families and in between and beginners and so on and so forth. So there's a wide variety of stuff.
A whole new world every time you open a box. One minute you're on the banks of the Nile farming crops and the Nile River's flooding you, then you're off climbing a mountain or building some monument, chopping off kings of England's heads. Yes, exactly.
Ancient Rome is popular, a lot of historical themes. Pirates are always good.
The ultimate goal for Reef Encounter is trying to feed your parrotfish a lot of coral tiles, which will score varying numbers of points at the game based on which coral is dominant over other corals.
I always try and sell Bonanza by telling people that it's the best German game about bean farming they'll ever play.
You're trying to grow these different corals on the board, and you take ownership of them by putting a shrimp on it.
I have a left dog and a right dog, and depending on which dog is stronger depends on if you're turning right or if you're turning left.
So there are things for people just tired and just came from work and wanted to have a good time with families and kids, so there are games for that.
War games still exist. They didn't stop making them in the 60s. They still make them. If you want to play a game that basically you need a degree in engineering to play, they have them.
Whether it's a deck building game or a card game or a collectible card game or a trading card game or a board game or a miniatures game or a party game, it doesn't matter. I can go on for days and all the different subcategories of things. It's a war game. Oh, well, I don't like that. That's a roll and move game. Or I like this because it has worker management. Those things don't really matter. Really, when we draw the line is like, people are like, well, how do you define this game? How do you categorize it? I'm like, is it fun?
Whenever I talk about I like board games, the next message I'm going to hear is, oh, you mean like Monopoly? And then sometimes if I'm feeling snarky, I'll say, no, I mean fun games.
Well, it's not really my favorite.
Monopoly is a very old game. It was a different time, and this time didn't have the pace our time has. So if the game lasts too long, it didn't matter.
I'm okay with Monopoly. We have our house rules, but so does everyone else. I've never played it the way it's supposed to be played. A lot of people are surprised that, you found out where, like, if you land on a space and nobody buys the house, it goes up for auction. So there's an auction all the time. I never played that way.
If I could wave my magic wand and make all the Monopolies become Settlers of Catan, and suddenly, everybody knows how to play that instead, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a better game. I think it's more fun.
They won't think like, oh, well, maybe Monopoly isn't a great game. They'll think Monopoly was my childhood, it was awesome, they get defensive. Yeah. But Monopoly isn't that great a game.
For the most part, that American, you think about what they call Ameritrash, or just games that have an American heritage or pedigree.
I don't like the term because I happen to like some of those games.
I think, to me, what Ameritrash games are sort of popular games that are not quite family games, things like Monopoly, but that are produced by American companies. So Heroscape being one that's set up upstairs right now, things like that. I personally just like board games. I don't really care where they came from or who designed them.
When anime just got popular in America, like it was niche, it was just starting to grow into something more, only the best of the best got translated and brought over. So people didn't see the 1,000 crap robot shows, they saw like the few great shows. And with this boutique gaming, it's the same thing. Only the Spiel des Jahres, only the really good games primarily get translated. And it's easy for someone to say, oh, German games are the best in the world because they see the 99% hit rate.
Oh, French movies are so great. Yeah, because you only see the 2 that get put in the art theater, right? You don't see the 200 that no one ever wants to watch again in their entire lives.
There's the American style game, which is kind of the crunchy, like theme and rolling lots of dice. And then there's the Euro style game, which is like no dice and not as much player interaction, and take that. And we've kind of tried to blend the two of them together, take our inspiration from both of them.
Now I will say, Monopoly, there's a new version, this Tropical Tycoon Monopoly, which uses victory points. And you accumulate points throughout the game. In addition, each player has a special ability that they can use in the game, and it uses a DVD. But so if you want to try Monopoly with a little bit of Eurogame flavor, try out Monopoly Tropical Tycoon, and you'll find that it makes Monopoly a more palatable experience because it's not just about grinding everyone into the dust. So for me, it's a starting point of discussion.
It still serves its purpose. I mean, it taught me how to count. It's an important game, and we can't like understate the importance and just how great the game was for what it was. But at the same time, we can't overstate how good the game is because it's not that good.
There's a lot of great people that I met that I game with regularly now, 2 or 3 Fridays a month to play games and just be social, order some pizza and things like that.
So I moved to Syracuse and for a few years would play with people I could find, colleagues and things like that, but then I decided to start a board gaming group. So I contacted the local game shop owner and said I'd like to start the Syracuse Board Gamers Group. I'd like to meet here at the shop. We talked back and forth about what that would involve, but they did have an open night, and so we got this started. Now the first month or so it was pretty much just me. And then a few people wandered by and wanted to see what was going on, and I showed them, and then they brought some of their friends, and then more people wandered by, and so it's actually grown and grown, and some nights we've had 30 or 40 people show up.
I teach in school, so I started a board game club. If I didn't teach in school, I would talk to a school and see if I could start one there anyway. I started one at my church. I have a board game night at my church. When I was near Army bases, I started board game clubs on the different bases for the soldiers. And then I find whatever local group's in the area. And if there's not a local group, then I start one.
I've met some of my favorite people, or people that I would consider to be our best friends through gaming.
Strangers will invite people into their homes to play games at the drop of a hat. Like we'd moved into the Mid-Hudson Valley, we weren't there that long, and we met some people at the local gaming club. That night, we just went over to their apartment, and we'd known each other for like a couple hours, and we played Starfarers of Catan like way into the night, and it was super awesome.
People I've met through board gaming, I know people in all 50 states, I know people in over 50 countries. That global network is so neat.
That special network of people who have this common interest. Gamers have that connection where you say, I'm going to be in California, next month for whatever reason. Where can I go to play games?
We're not scared, we're not hurting each other. It's not a police situation. My mom was like, you're going to a stranger's house. I'm like, why not? I've been to hundreds of strangers' houses, whatever. If there's games in the house, it's a good house.
Yeah.
What happened was around 1999, we were looking for board gaming groups in the area. We couldn't find any, so we ended up putting out some calls on various email groups and some of the internet forums, like some of the Usenet forums. And we found out that there were a lot of groups in the area. What we discovered was that many of the groups didn't know each other. And so people were gaming, but they didn't really understand that there were other groups doing exactly the same thing. So we decided that we would sort of form a list where the groups could at least interact a little bit. People that were looking for more gaming could go to more than one group. And Finally, we got the list up to about 50 or 60 people, and we decided that this was probably a good time to actually have an event that brought all of the local groups together. And we had Unity Games 1, I think, in January 2000, and 44 people showed up, and we couldn't believe that we had 44 people that would come for the day and play games. And we kept doing them, and each time they kept growing a little bit, and today I know we're over 350. I haven't looked at the final count, so it's pretty exciting.
A lot of times I don't feel the need to buy games because everybody around me is a gamer, and I'm like, hey, I know he bought this game, we'll just play that over his house, or he'll bring in that game, that's a short half-hour game, we'll play that over lunch one day. And so when you're surrounded by so many people that are gamers, you don't necessarily need to get everything, but there's always the collecting element, and some people just like to have them.
Well, my game collection isn't that big.
It's actually kind of a modest number.
My game collection's pretty small compared to some of the people here.
It's between 100 and 130 games, and that's not that big.
300 to 350 maybe.
We have probably 350 games or so.
Over 400.
Really?
I think so.
Wow.
Probably about twice as many as I should have.
About 425 games.
I think my game collection hovers at around 500.
We have about 500 right now.
We're behind on inventorying. It's something over 11,000, probably about 11,500-ish, somewhere in there. Collecting is the best game of all, in some senses. I like searching out in the thrift stores and auctions and that sort of stuff. That's a lot of fun. I had to start inventorying when I started losing track of what I had. Come back from an auction and then discover, heck, I already had this one. So then as we got more and more, it became more important for like insurance purposes and whatnot. So yeah, so it's all inventoried. And then as far as actually where something physically is, I just remember it for the most part.
Always have to ask her.
Yeah, I'm the one who knows where they are.
I always say I'm going to stop, or if I'm going to get more games, I need to get rid of some first. It doesn't always work out that way.
There's always that one game that I haven't played in, 5 or 6 years, but you never know. When I get old and I go to that old folks gaming home, and they don't make this game anymore, I may need it.
The game stores. So these stores that are game stores, they don't have games. They have comics and sports cards, and they have a couple games, but you don't walk in and you're like, games, this place is all about games. And they're not stores because they don't sell anything. They just stand there and they're like game vendors. They're like, oh, you can bring that up to the counter if you want, and I'm going to sit here the whole time. It's the standard comic book guy, You may pay me $5 for that today, and he comes up and gives you the thing, and then he sells it to you, or he doesn't because he wanted to close early or something. That sort of unprofessional atmosphere. And so that's what we didn't like, and that's what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to make a better breed of game store because we want that to integrate with the local community. We want to be a positive force within the community.
It's hard to believe he opened a second store so quickly. It's completely well stocked. It's packed. I go down there on Saturday, goodness, there's a lot of people down there. And he's really doing a great job.
Let's say I have a budget of $50 a month that I spend on games, or $25 a month. Okay, cool. Spend that at your local store. A portion of that is going to maintaining the physical presence in your community that will then bring new people in so that your gaming group doesn't die over time, because you can meet people there through events, all that stuff, and you can't do that online. You can meet people online, that's great, and you can coordinate events and all that stuff, but it doesn't replace the people that aren't going on those sites to find out about things online.
I was down there in Manchester the other day. A woman walked in to ask for something, not a game. She was looking for toys, a particular shop, I don't know what exactly. I didn't hear what she was asking for, but he's like, well, no, we don't carry that. We carry a lot of board games, this, that, and the other. And within 10 minutes, she had already left her information and signed up for the free game drawing and had taken a couple of game recommendations from him for her nephews and said, this is really great. I never knew all this existed before. I have to come back. And it was just like, holy cow, Dan?
We're trying to focus on having the best selection and the best service and the best presentation and the best experience for games. That's all we're trying to do.
The designing community for games is amazing. Where did the greatest board games in the world come from? I'll tell you, everywhere.
Originally, most of the designers were German or European, and it slowly begins that the Americans sort of make their own sort of footprint, and you get Americans who are designing games of that ilk.
I can name you great games that come from Germany, from America, from France, from Italy, from Japan, from Korea, from Taiwan.
Previously, we had no idea who the American game designers were. There was no recognition for them. They didn't appear in boxes. There was nothing to let you know that this game was designed by a person.
So that was sort of where it got started, was just typing board games into a search engine one day. And it kind of catapulted from there. A few years later, I was lucky enough to be invited to Alan Moon's Gathering of Friends and met, all these great people. Designers, heads of game publishing, companies, and I thought, well, I could do this.
I saw a job posting at the Fantasy Flight website, and I'm like, well, I've got a pretty good job right now, but this is kind of a dream job. I have to apply for it, so I applied, and didn't hear back for a long time, and then a couple of months later, I got a call back, and they said, we want to fly you out for an interview, and it just kind of worked out.
So yeah, I had nearly every Avalon Hill game going, and I just loved the idea of visiting their factory and meeting some game designers, etc. over in America. So got on a plane, flew to America, I rocked up to the Avalon Hill office and said, hey, I'm here from Australia, any possibility of designing a game for you? Eric Dott and his son Jack Dott took me out to dinner that night, and we talked for 5 hours about what things I could do, etc., etc. And anyway, they said, yeah, go home to Australia, do a sequel to one of our games, and I picked Diplomacy, and yeah, that's how it all started.
So many people in the board game design business are such unpretentious people. I meet famous people all the time, and no one blinks. Oh, this is Richard Borg, the designer of Memoir 44. Well, okay, great, good to meet you. And it's like meeting a rock star, except they're friendly, accessible, and they're not surrounded by guards.
Welcome to the Dungeon Twister. I'm a big addict of all the extreme sports, gliding sports and all that, kite surfing, snowboarding. Composer, singer, rapper, and now publisher with Ludically.
Well, Gift Trap really came from a very simple question. My daughter asked, we were actually trying to have a conversation about what game to invent. It was just after Christmas, and she asked this really kind of poignant question, which was, how does Father Christmas decide what gifts to give to children? And from that, I was like, ooh. I was on a radio interview, and I'm chatting, and someone calls in. The radio host goes, okay, Nick, so it's great. We've got a live customer of yours on the line who's played the game. And I'm in that, oh, this is not going to go down the middle. This is either going to be a lover or a hater. I don't know which one it's going to be. And the woman sort of went off on this tirade about how wonderful the game was. And she'd always want to be cryogenically preserved, right, which is just crazy, and she'd never had the courage to tell her family about this gift, right? So she plays the game, and this is kind of just the serendipitous kind of thing that happened with Gift Trap. Out comes that gift out of the pack, because that is one of the gifts in the game, to be frozen, and so it comes up amongst a whole lot of other gifts. Well, none of her family gave that gift. She said it was her greatest gift. Comes to scoring it, everyone scores really badly, but now they know, family, that hadn't happened, but Gift Trap just provided that means where that could happen.
The biggest people in gaming are the publishers. The designers are important, but the publishers are the ones who actually get the game from the designer's creative mind and onto our tables. And these publishers are big. I would say Jay Tumbleson from Rio Grande, Zev from Z-Man Games, the folks over at Mayfair Games. Christian Peterson's a big driving force from Fantasy Flight Games. All the little smaller publishers, the publishers from Germany, Days of Wonder. There's just so many different companies. I'm afraid that I'm going to miss one, but the publishers are out there and they're making it work.
I think I mentioned this in a column I did on my site. The Jay Tumbleson, is in a way the father of all this. Like everything we see around here at all the conventions, a lot of it leads right back to Jay, and I don't think Jay gets enough credit for being sort of the father of all this.
My home office overlooked the Rio Grande River. And so on the day that I had set as a deadline to come up with a title, I'm looking at the Rio Grande River thinking I got to come up with a name, and I didn't want Jay's Games or anything like that. And I said, oh, Rio Grande games. I learned of the games about 15 years ago and said, wow, these are really great, and kind of decided that they would be also enjoyed by people who spoke English, but of course not while they were in German. So.
Certainly the games are already out in Germany, but he was the one who came up with the brilliant idea of publishing the games, co-publishing them in English and bringing them over here.
The idea was simply, well, talk to the Germans, see if they would allow me to do English versions of them, and they did.
People always like to think, oh, there's this huge competition between companies and whatnot. You know, at its core, we all understand, I think, that it's a growing market, and that, you know, anyone that, if I were to teach someone Carcassonne and they like it, it's likely that at some point in the future they may run across the Settlers of Catan. You know, I say that semi-facetiously because they will.
You go to a show and like we help each other out. Like we were near Z-Man's booth last year, and Zev is a great guy, and I always go over and I say hi. And
there's competitiveness in the sense that we all want to do well, and you know, but there's not. If Mayfair or you know, Rio Grande, they get more people involved in board games, that's better for me.
People will help each other out. It's a really friendly industry.
Who are the game designers? Who are the people making, you know, modern strategy games? And to a large degree, they all have other careers and they're all doing other things. There are very few people who make a living designing games.
My professional job is a family physician. I do sports medicine, and gaming is my hobby.
So my day job, I work in publishing. I do production work for school textbooks.
My job is in the Federal Ministry for the Environment of Germany.
I'm a forest ranger, so it's just pretty much like, you know, Aragon and Lord of the Rings, very much like that, with less orcs and more mending fences and surveys and things like that.
I was actually director of a big mortgage company. I used to be a computer programmer years ago, but that's all behind me now.
I'm an advocate, which is broadly the equivalent of an English barrister, but it means that I get to be not only a lawyer, but I get to wear a wig. And I'm the only person at the Scottish bar that looks younger with a wig on.
I found a way to be only game designer by publishing my own stuff. So I get more money out of each copy, so I don't have to have a success of 1 million games or something like that. So I can sell. I went to the biggest board game fair in the world, which is in Germany, in Essen, in 1991, and there were a lot of guys with little small company stuff. They have a little booth and yeah, some handmade stuff, whatever, 200 copies, and I was seeing that it is possible to do so.
Really, this has been the case ever since, you know, games really started way back when, because like George Parker used to design and play all his games back in the 1800s and 1900s. That's how he started. He made a game and then he took the train to Boston. You can imagine back in the, the 1800s, took the train to Boston and walked around to different shops and was like, would you like to sell my game? Would you like to sell my game? So we're really kind of still at that phase, like people are still doing that.
Essen is actually kind of the reason for that, because they can take day trips, they can go over there on a Saturday or something like that, get in, go buy a couple games, put them on their shelves, and now over the next year they'll play them. And, you know, that's what they do. And the cool thing about it is that that gives rise to small publishers, where, you know, in our market there's just very little place for small publishers. It's really hard as a publisher to make it in this business. I mean, I wouldn't want to do it.
My name is Greg Lamb, and in my spare time I run Pair of Dice Games, independent games company that I started with a couple of friends back in 2001. Right now it's just me though, and I put out games whenever I can, and 3 of them have been in the Games 100 issue of Games Magazine. This is one of the earlier board games that we've done called Knockabout. It's on the front. I made a t-shirt just for promotional sake with the board, and in the back is the rules of the game.
You know, some publishers go the self-publication route. To avoid that, I can control everything. You know, I can be the auteur and present the games how I want to present them. And sometimes that situation works out fantastically. If you look at someone like Friedemann Friese, who now publishes several games a year, both through his own company and through other companies. And has a huge number of fans who like his style of work.
In Germany, the games all start with the letter F because of my name Friedemann Friese and the game company 2F Spiele. So they are always starting with an F and they are always in green boxes. This is the branding of my company, and the translations normally still have the green box, not all of them, and in some translation issues the letter F is not in there anymore.
You know, he works as a disc jockey. He's worked part-time in a game store. He still does, as far as I know. He does all this stuff together, and yet he does enough game design and sells enough where he can kind of, you know, do what he wants with that.
I want to put these games out into the community because I think there is definitely an audience for them. And I don't know how to do it in any other manner but self-publishing. I mean, I really dislike the process of trying to sell your idea to someone and waiting on them to approve you. If someone wants to call and say, hey, we like Restaurant Row, we'll pick it up, I'm all ears. But I actually pitched it in Origins 2008 to a publisher, and I actually hadn't heard from the publisher a year later when I had gotten my ducks in a row to the point where I could put the game out myself, so I just put it out myself.
The thing about game designers is the really successful game designers are also businessmen, and they do all the parts of the job promoting themselves, and the ones who want to be artists, and it's just like other types of artists. If that's what they want to do, that's fine, but they're going to have a lot harder time to be successful just because you really have to run your life like a business.
I mean, ideally you can, you know, make a living and keep doing it, but that's a very rare thing to happen. You know, the classic story is the people who designed Trivial Pursuit. When they first designed Trivial Pursuit, they self-published the game, and they did a lot of research to get questions and this, that, and the other, but they were not business people. They came out with a game where, I forget the exact numbers, but it was something like it cost them $60 to produce the game, and they were selling them for around $30. They completely botched it. They had no idea what they were doing in the business sense, but they had sold the game to people, and then they produced it. They were losing money on every copy they sold, but it became a media phenomenon, and it got picked up by a larger publisher, and then they made a ton of money.
My name is Brian Johnson, and I live in Salem, Massachusetts, and I'm a board game designer.
I've been living in Salem now for a little over 12 years, and as much as I love the town, out-of-towners can sometimes, especially this time of year, being October, can make life less than convenient. Need help finding someplace?
We're trying to
Where are you looking for?
To here.
Oh, you want to go to the Dracula's Castle on the wharf? You want to go this way and take a left. I guess that's what drives our economy here, the tourism and the witch hats and the busloads of people that come into town every year. And, you know, by the end of October, I'm very ready for November 1st. The idea for Huangdi, it originally started in about 2005. I was working my normal job at night, and the floor at work it's just a bunch of squares. The tiles are just all these squares. And one night I was just looking at them, and I was just seeing patterns in my mind with the squares on the floor. And I went home that night and I had some graph paper, and I started making the different patterns that I was thinking of. And then I heard about the Protoslam competition that Cambridge Games Factory was running at Unity Games, which is a local convention.
I think there might have been 4 or 5 people who participated in it, and they really liked Brian's Great Wall of China.
It's a fun game about building the Chinese wall. Okay, you're 2 to 6 players, you're building a Chinese wall, you've got these special roll cards that give you different actions, you handle money, you do this, that, and the other. And you score points by building an awesome wall. You want to contribute to the Great Wall of China.
And luckily I ended up winning first place in that. And about 2 weeks later, Ed Carter from Cambridge Games Factory called me and asked me if I'd like to have my game published, which of course I did. When Cambridge Games Factory originally picked it up, I had a prototype that they put together for me, and I went to the Gathering of Friends in 2007,
And of course there's a lot of publishers there and other designers and things. And so I was playing it with as many people as I could. And one of the guys that I played it with was Marcus Wellborn from JKLM.
And then Cambridge just... It didn't actually, it's not completely dead, but...
There was some bumps in the road, and they ended up giving me the option whether I wanted to back out of the contract. And that's when JKLM decided to pick up the game, and I signed a new contract with them. And now it's due to be released early 2009. So anytime now.
So it's a sort of a way, it's good that JKLM is picking up, but it still has taken, was it 3-4 years now to get it to market? I'm sure Brian wanted that to happen a lot sooner than that.
Even after JKLM picked it up, it's like, oh, we could pump that sucker out in 2 months, you know? And it's like, but it was just delay after delay after delay. And I think that for them it was difficult because they were trying to release like 3 games at the same time. This one, Tulip Mania, and Ascendancy. And all that did was slow down all 3 games.
Sometimes the contracts in the game world are very haphazard, and a lot of handshake deals are made with people saying, yeah, we'll do this, we'll do 3,000 copies of your game, and you'll get this royalty, and we're going to come out at this date. Or it'll be a little email conversation that, you know, that's all we have. And sometimes that's all you need because things work out fine and there's no problems. And other times you need more. Who actually has the right to the game? Who owns the rights? Are you buying the rights or are you licensing? How long are you licensing the rights for? In which languages? In which countries? All sorts of details that, you know, beginning designers or beginning publishers even may not be aware of or think about when they're coming out with their game.
To most people, Essen is a city in Germany. But if you ask a board gamer, Essen is Mecca.
Describe Essen in one sentence.
Crazy. It's so busy. Like this morning I arrived, I had my box of mini gift wrap under my arm, and I couldn't move. I got swept with the crowd. Like, as you come in through the entrance, I'm like, oh, I can't move. And then I got round one corner, and I was lost.
Basically, we have 2 big main game conventions in the United States. One's Origins, one's Gen Con. They're in the summer. You know, Origins is like 15,000, Gen Con's 25,000. In Essen, they pull about 150,000 people. This is 90% board games, and it's so much, you know, and people just look at me like, you're making all this up, right? This is not true. Like, no, it's really, you know, it's true. It's really just different. you will hear more English, Italian, French, Spanish, Japanese, probably than you will German today. Because this is the day that everyone who has taken their paid vacation, bought themselves a ticket to Germany, brought their travel luggage scale with them so they can weigh out how much under their airplane weight allowance, comes and buys a ton of stuff. Come in on Saturday and go to one of the booths, or just walking down the aisles, and you'll see mom and dad and the kids and grandma and grandpa.
There are at least 10 halls here, and every one of those is jam-packed full of people playing games off of stands.
It is the, was heißt das Einzige? It is a marijuana game.
It's so hard to explain to people what Essen is like, and the closest equivalent I can come is if you were to take a street fair, which is a typical street fair in the US, take everybody that's there and drop them into a game show.
I've read several reports from Americans who went here, and they were always amazed that it's such a big thing. But whenever I read about Gen Con, I thought, hey, Gen Con must be similar, but it's not at all. I'm normally 2 days here. On the first day I get the collector stuff, especially since they have connected the Comic Con and the Games Con. I can go to the one hall to get the comics, and then I go over to the role-playing games and get the limited editions.
You're in this environment that you can all share no matter what language you're in. I mean, I still remember my first time when I went to Spiel. I was learning a game from a Japanese designer. There was a German person who was demoing the game, asking questions to the designer in Japanese, speaking to me in English, and I was playing with 3 French people, where one French person was translating into French for the other 2. So it was 4 languages all at once mixing into this, just so we could play this card game.
Agricola, die Moorbauern, the Moor farmers, a game about farming, hard decisions, cold winters, and there will be horses.
Yeah, you log in, we give you a card you can log in with. You don't need a Board Game Geek account. Log in and you can rate any game at the fair between 1 and 5 stars.
So do you play Tishu?
I play Tishu.
I mean, it is like the mecca of board gaming world, where you go down on your knees 5 times a day and you play games on the floor, because there's no room on the table.
I've been there and it is amazing. You don't have to go there to enjoy board games, but wow, there's more board games there than you'll ever see the rest of your life put together, I think. Every game designer, every publisher is there. It's just a very exciting place to go. It's expensive when you live in America or another country outside of Germany, but wow, every board gamer wants in their life.
Even if you do it once in your lifetime.
Once before you die, you need to make the pilgrimage to Essen, as it were.
The best place to present your games, even today, is at the Essen show. Anybody who has a game, whether it's 1 or 3 or 10 to show, can go to the show, get a ticket, walk in, take a set of business cards, just walk around up to the booth of the different publishers and ask to have a meeting to show a game or 2.
we find it easier to come to Essen to publish our game, to do 1,000 copies, and then if publishers want it, then they can speak to us and then we can give it to them. And it's much easier for us because we then license it, and we can then go on to do the thing that we do best, and it's fun for us, which is publish our next game.
Yeah. When I came in 2000, I brought in Lunatic's Loop, and I insured it, and little did I know you have to pay an import tax on your games. So, and the import tax was well over, my net for the games.
I've been going, I think, since I was 13, 14 or something, yeah, and I was very small initially, and so that's been pretty amazing to come here and still see that it's still retained its charm and soul and everything.
I'm Marcus Wellborn. I produce and many other things and do with board games. Ultimately, anything to do with board gaming, we will look at people's designs, help develop games. Generally, if we've helped develop, we will go down the road of production. We're aiming for Huangdi. I really don't want to put too much of a date on it, but we're aiming early next year. So we've got one game going through first, which is now finished, ready to go. It's just waiting for me to press the button, and Huangdi is behind that. So, we've got a little bit of catching up to do on last year. So, if we haven't made enough back on the last game, we can't go to the next game. It's just one of those sort of cycle factors that makes things really difficult sometimes and frustrating, because we want to move and we want to keep things going, but it doesn't always work the way you want it to, and sometimes bad things happen.
The publisher goes through things and it takes time to work things out, whether it's financial or if they're having some other kind of difficulty with production or translating, whatever it is. I know that those things take time to work out. To put kind of a humorous spin on it, I got an email a while ago from a friend of mine named John Wanke, and he had pre-ordered Huangdi about 1.5 years ago now, so it's been a long time, and he kind of cheered me up a little bit when he sent me an email and he says, it's okay, because one of these days when I'm old and gray, a box will show up at my door. It'll be Huangdi, and I totally forgot about it. And it was just really, really funny because, it made me think, okay, in the whole scheme of things, 1 year, 2 years, okay, it's hard to wait through, it's hard to be patient, but, when you look at the bigger scale, it's going to eventually be out. It's going to get released, and things will be better, but it's just getting to the point where, I'm seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. We're getting so close.
JKLM essentially declared bankruptcy. Not real, I don't know what it is in the UK, but they essentially are out of business. And Prime Games, which is owned by somewhat the same people, is going to be publishing some of the games that JKLM was doing. And there's a number of games that kind of skipped the queue, where they were like, we're going to publish these 3 games. And then other things like, went ahead of the other stuff. And now, I don't know. There was a note about Huangdi being available again, where the designer now has the right to, the designer has the rights and he can, take it somewhere else. And Brian posted, he's like, I didn't know about this. It's very sad to see, because Brian's a really sweet guy and the game is good. And then through circumstances like this, where you are partnering up with other people, that's what happens. Sometimes things just don't work out the way you want them to work out.
So there's a game in everybody, right? It's absolutely true. Everyone's got a book inside them. Everyone's got a game inside them. And if you want to publish that game, just prepare yourself for the mental roller coaster, because it's quite a journey.
First piece of advice always is put something down on paper. Start putting your thoughts on paper.
Ideas aren't worth anything. There's no point in keeping an idea secret. Everyone has the same idea, probably as you. Just tell it to everyone, you know, so that you can discuss it and maybe learn something new. Keeping it a secret is pointless. You know, even if you think, oh, you're gonna make money off of it, no, you're not. The only thing that is worth anything is the ability and the talent to execute on an idea, right?
If you have a game you like, but you think it is not as good as it should be, then it is a good thing to do, to work on it, just to change it. And sometimes you get only a game changed, but sometimes you get a totally different game, and then you are a game designer.
Every month or so, we have hundreds of games that we've got about 80% of the way to being a game. And then there's that critical moment where you have all the concepts and like everything's together, but you need like the link, and we never get the link, and then we move on to some other game.
I think one of the things that's important about it is we didn't sit out and say we're going to sit out and make money. What we want to do is sit out and publish a board game and take it to Essen. And I think, you know, if you don't have the passion for that, then you're probably if you're thinking I'm going to produce a board game and make money, it's not going to work.
I hear people sometimes say, I can't afford to go to Germany. Well, I couldn't afford it either, but I couldn't afford not to go.
I think you need the heart. It's the same with making a good novel or a good picture, or without your heart, you have no chance.
Because the best games come out of passion. Like if you want a game to be good and you'll do everything it takes to make it good, and you'll play test it, and if something's wrong with it, you'll fix it. It's easy when it's like a Nintendo or something big, or even like a standard American board games, to get it just good enough to where, all right, it might cost us $10,000 and another week to make it this much better. Will we sell the same number of copies? Yes, then just sell this game. But the crazy Knizia will sit there forever until the game is perfect.
Rainer Knizia is just, he has really crossed the barrier where he has very good designs, where he has a lot of fans, people who want his work. He successfully does new designs, he does spin-offs of existing designs, so he's fulfilling what publishers are asking him to do. At the same time, he's submitting his other things. He knows what publishers want to see.
We can have a creative session in an afternoon and have 2 or 3 ideas, which may fly. But to then develop an idea into a product which is fantastic and really perfect, it takes many months. And so every idea almost becomes a burden. I'm almost burdened by the many ideas I have and the team have, because the development process is a long circle, and so I have my famous drawers at home in the studio, which used to be 40, and they grew and grew, and now it's 90. We have 90 drawers. Each drawer has one game in them, one game idea in them, which is in development.
In the gaming industry, I just wanted to leave a trace. I never ever dreamed it will reach this. Like this box is the box. I pleased myself. I did the box that I would have loved to buy myself as a player, and I thought, same way as when I designed the game, if I please myself, maybe I'll please the most part of the same players in the world.
People sometimes say to me like, well, we'd love to have your job. Well, they would now for sure, but like they probably wouldn't have enjoyed all the other years as much. I worked as a waiter most of my life that I wasn't working in game companies, and I didn't mind that because it's just I can make my own hours and stuff. So yeah, it's just I think some people are successful right away without too much effort. I certainly wasn't that way, and so I appreciate a lot that what I had to go through.
At the end of a game of Dominion, when it comes to the point where the provinces are almost going to run out, right, and you're never going to shuffle your deck again, you just forget buying action cards. It's Dutchy, 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 unless you can afford a province.
And every time that happens, he's like, Dutchy Panic Time!
Yeah,
he buys a Dutchy.
Like, it's DPT, and I'm like, what's DPT? He's like, Dutchy Panic Time, and I'm like, I've been doing that. We all know that same strategy of Dutchy Panic Time, but he had a name for it, So it's like, as soon as he brings that out, it's like, yeah, DPT, let's go, Dutchy, 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 and game's over.
My own son's music teacher asked me after one of his lessons a couple of months ago. They said, oh, you all are German, Did you, have you ever played Dominion over Thanksgiving break? We played Dominion.
Very addictive. Everyone is building their own deck as they play this game, but the combinations are endless, and yet it's simple enough that young children can play with adults, and it's one of those few games I bring out and everyone seems to like it.
Well, that's the story that would instill hope in, I guess, a designer who has some designs but doesn't know what to do with them.
So I made Dominion in October of 2006, and I made a bunch of cards, which I eventually divided up into the main set and 2 expansions. And then I made 3 more games that had nothing to do with Dominion. And my friends just refused to try them. They were utterly uninterested. They just wanted to play Dominion. And so, okay, I made more Dominion expansions. And so, you know, who should I show Dominion to? And I looked at the boxes of games I have. I don't have a large collection, but I have some. And I looked at the boxes, and it was Rio Grande, Rio Grande, Rio Grande, Rio Grande. Oh, okay, I'll contact Rio Grande.
I get a number of emails on a regular basis from people saying, do you consider designs from outside sources? What do I have to do? And I have a very standard answer, which is I only look at games at conventions. I'll be at these conventions over the next year.
And this was like in January, and the first con was in June. So I picked the first one, which was Origins. Okay, I'll go to Origins. And he said, great, see you there. And in the intervening time, I mean, I worked on these expansions more, and then I worked on making polished versions of some of my older games, that is just pre-year prototypes, so that I could show them off.
It was really great. That was at Origins 2 years ago, and someone said, you got to play this game. I think you'll like this game because I like card games. And so we went over, we played it, we said, this is really good.
Origins came around, and the meeting time came around, and we found each other, and I sat down, and the first game he showed me was Dominion. And I said, well, I'll do that one.
So, do you have a speculation on who you think might win?
I think Dominion probably is going to win.
I haven't tried Dominion yet. I've been looking at that.
Oh, it's really fun.
Is it?
It's really fun. And he plays all really well with 2 or 3.
I didn't know about this stuff until making Dominion, and then everyone said, oh, this is the important award, and, this is the one that matters, that really affects sales. It looked to me like probably it would get a special complex game award like they've done a few times. When it didn't get a special complex game award and was actually nominated, then I thought, well, it's not going to win because it's too complex.
Games Jenny Tomlinson und last but not least den Autor Donald Vaccarino, auf den wir ganz besonders gespannt sind, weil er bis jetzt noch nicht gewählt worden ist.
It's a video presentation for the 5 nominees for Spiel des Jahres, and then they lift the cover, and there was Dominion. It was a fabulous moment. I called the printer to place the big order, and I called Donald to let him know. I called my wife.
It was nice to win. It's it's one thing to have your prediction about the world that you're confident in. It's another thing for the world to back that up with stuff actually happening.
About who are the famed American designers? There's not a lot that we can talk about. Donald Vaccarino is an American. There we go. Woo, Donald Vaccarino won Game of the Year in Germany in 2009. And ask anyone on the street, and they're just going to be like, what? I don't know what you're talking about. Because Game of the Year in Germany does not mean anything in the US, even though the game will sell millions of copies around the world.
The question is, Jay, is Dominion that successful in the US as it is over here too?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Very, very popular in the US and actually around the world. We're in 16 languages now.
In 16 already?
Yes.
Dominion is now appearing. I see it in Borders and Barnes & Noble. It's in other game stores. It's out there, but there is zero marketing, there's zero presence or awareness of what it is. It's just sort of leaking out in bits and pieces, and it's up to people who are interested in games to go out and do the research and find out what's coming. I want to see what Andy Looney is coming out with next. No one knows who Andy Looney is. I mean, he has a card game called Flux, which is now in its 4th edition. There's all sorts of spin-offs. It sold an unbelievable number of copies. If you look at records from game stores and say, which are the best-selling games, Flux is always up there near the top, the other one being Munchkin. So we got Steve Jackson and Andy Looney is probably the best-selling American designers on the market today. No one is going to, no one in the general population is going to have a clue who these guys are. Even though all of Steve Jackson's games come from a company called Steve Jackson Games.
Because they're like, do people even play board games anymore? Doesn't everybody just play video games these days? And then they realize that there's this whole world that they're not even aware of. And I think there are some great gateway games out there like Settlers that make people aware of, like, holy cow, this is something new, and I didn't even realize that people even still play board games.
I hear those kinds of comments from new customers all the time. Where have these games been? How come I didn't know about it?
I think what it would take is people in a high-profile situation, it's like a movie star or some kind of TV personality who says, I play games and I enjoy it, this is what I play.
We just need to keep the signals coming and keep the message consistent, and things will build from there. So,
fundamentally, the only barrier to selling games, and assuming it's a reasonably good game, is someone learning it and understanding how to play it. So word of mouth is by far the best way. And it works no matter what the distribution channel is.
There's a project that's, I forget what it's called, it's basically about gaming in public, and they coordinate events and all that stuff, and then I think they start doing contests and such. So like, oh, tell us about an event that you ran in public, because we want gaming to be out there.
It's going to take time, and that's everyone still kind of dismisses it as sort of the hobby and all of that. But we can look at our numbers and we can look at the efforts that we've been putting into this, and we can see that that's happening. It's coming, and it will come.
We play games, and so we're growing up having our kids play games, and not as just like, oh yeah, you kids go play games. Like, hey, we want to play games with you. Like, when this guy gets to be 3, we've got like lists set out. They're like, these are the games we're going to play. And
I remember playing Balloon Cup with my youngest daughter. She was maybe 7, and she's there holding her cards, and she's studying the layout. This is maybe a big game. Looking at her cards, looking at the layout. Finally, she looks up at me and says, Dad, and very innocently, Dad, I've got a hand of crap.
This, I think, is the first generation where we're actively kind of training our kids in the panoply of games that are available, and that's really cool.
By putting board games on computers and video game systems opens up people's eyes to it as well. Settlers of Catan and some other games are on like Xbox and things like that.
Well, I was a real big doubter about that. When Days of Wonder had tickets right online, I was like, wow, we're giving the product away for free. But that just isn't true, and I was just wrong about that. They have figures that say, when somebody logs on as a guest, they know, and then if that same person comes back with a number that they bought their product, they log on again. And the numbers are really impressive for how many people within 30 days go out and buy the product after they played it online. And I mean, you just can't argue with that.
There are people who would never have discovered the game and who have bought the board game now because they've been exposed to it through Xbox.
But it takes away some of the face-to-face social interaction where you can read people's emotions, read their face, and it's a different beast than playing that way. But I don't think it's a bad thing. It opens it up to, hey, this is a fun game. Oh, I could buy a real physical version of it and play with friends, here in the house.
And video games do a lot of things better than analog games. You can't replace that experience of that analog experience, and that's where we're starting to see things like the touch surface, where you're taking the aspects that are good about computers to chips, especially as chips get so tiny now that you could just put them in anything. So you're starting to simulate that experience. We're still in an analog environment, we're touching things, we're not touching, and sometimes I'm rolling dice, I'm rolling physical dice, and then they get reflected because they have chips in them and stuff. So that's really neat to see develop, but that's not replacing the face-to-face experience, it's enhancing it.
For the video game it took about a year, a little bit over a year actually. But compared to other video games, this is still a small project, so it's about a year with something like 7 or 8 people.
So if the game is a success right from the start, they already thought and put into the program everything needed to implement all the new expansions. On the contrary, I could develop characters specially for the video game that would be put in the video game first, play tested worldwide for the video game, And if people like them and all that, we could as ludically publish them as board game, doing a team with some characters that came from the video game. We are going to do cross things like this in both ways.
If I look at the Nintendo DS, I've done games for the Nintendo DS. It's a much more closed system. You have to buy the games for $20, $30, euros. When I go to the iPhone, it costs me $1 and I get a game, and I can have fun with that as well. It's a slightly different type of game. This is a new challenge because it's not I don't really suggest you take the old games and just translate them one-to-one. What I'm saying is you need to take the spirit and the core of the new media with what you work, and then you need to kind of do it justice and bring out the strengths of that. The world changes, and I think one of the things is also I believe I need to change with the world. And it's not I must, but I want to because I find it exciting.
My quote, if there is one associated with me and Board Game Geek and board gaming in general, is I genuinely believe the world's a better place if more people play board games.
When people say, you know, are you retired? I mean, I'm never really going to be retired because I love what I do. And whether I do it significantly less or whatever I do, I just love what I do. There's no way, why would I stop?
I think it encourages people to interact face to face. It encourages people to think outside of their normal thought patterns. I think it helps keep you sharp long term.
It's social, it gets people together, there's a lot of face-to-face action, so there's a lot of interaction going on. You're hanging out with people, hanging out with friends. Nothing wrong with that. That's what board games do.
And when you nail that puzzle, when your plan works, it's you know, you get that sort of rush. And
you know, Settlers of Catan changed my life, for Christ's sake. It got me interested in board gaming, got me introduced to Aldi, got me introduced to George, the guy I've been working for on Wall Street for the last, you know, several years. I mean, you know, it's great. I love him.
That's the only reason I care about money. You know, I want to design games all day, every day.
Because, you know, it'd be so easy to do a game about seagulls, because look at all the action they do, right? Look at that. I mean, how could you not? Whoever can stand on the rock the longest.
It's not easy to be a seagull.
What was really funny is she starts kindergarten, right? And they send this paper home for us to fill out for them. And it had, what was your favorite board game? So we put Lord of the Rings Confrontation, and I told my wife I would love to have seen that teacher's face.
So really, if you want to get gamers, if you want to be a serial killer and get gamers, just have a truck, but instead of free candy, it's like free settlers. And just drive down the street, like,
just
hey
like
kid.
the D&D truck, and then all the little nerds come out of the houses, oh my god! And then you close the door.
I've been here. I've been here before. We're going in circles.
What do you think of this kind of porting over that's going on? You know, like Catan being put
I love you. You see what it does? You see what gaming does?
I'm one of the few people who got upset when the price of gas went down because for a while my car was actually worth something. I'm here all week. Try the fish. Thank you.